The ground trembles beneath deals that were never meant to last. Every handshake, every signature, carries a cost nobody can escape in the quiet of the offices behind closed doors. Power is measured in silence, threats, and secrets. And this time, the stakes are higher than ever. One wrong move, one hidden truth exposed, could destroy everything. Land is more than dirt and oil, it's the battleground. And everyone is about to pay the price. Dark clouds hang low over the horizon, casting long shadows across a landscape that has seen greed, betrayal, and violence. The camera moves slowly over empty oil fields, abandoned machinery creaking in the wind. A single piece of paper flutters across the dirt, carrying the remnants of promises that were broken long ago. The air feels heavy, like it is carrying the weight of all the secrets buried beneath this land. A faint whisper of a warning rides the wine soft, almost imperceptible, but chilling. Whoever controls this land controls everything, yet no one can truly hold it for long. Inside a dimly lit office, the walls lined with maps and contracts, a figure moves silently. The room is quiet except for the subtle sound of papers shuffling. This is a place where power is calculated, measured in lines of ink and the pause between breaths. On the desk lies a folder marked with a warning nobody wants to face. The camera lingers over it, the edges frayed from years of handling, as if it carries a life of its own. Each document inside could change the future, ignite a feud, or crush a career. Every signature has consequences that ripple far beyond the room, far beyond the hands that touch the paper. Outside, the land stretches endlessly, untouched by those who claim it. Yet constantly watched, shadows move between the hills as if the land itself is alive, waiting for the right moment to reveal the truth. The wind picks up, carrying faint echoes of arguments past, deals gone wrong, and promises made in secrecy. Every tree, every stone seems to remember, and those who try to ignore the warning soon realize the land remembers them too. A truck rumbles across a distant road, dust rising like a signal in the still air. The engine dies, and silence returns. But tension lingers. Every eye is watching, every ear listening. Nothing escapes the quiet judgment of this place. A phone vibrates on a desk inside another office, breaking the silence like a sudden thunderclap. The caller ID shows a name that once meant trust, now a reminder of betrayal. Hands hesitate before answering. Decisions must be made, but hesitation itself carries weight. The land, the deals, the people, all are interconnected, and every choice tips the balance. Someone is about to cross a line that cannot be uncrossed. Outside the window, shadows stretch longer, as if the day itself is reluctant to end. Darkness is coming, and it will reveal everything hidden beneath the surface. The scene shifts to a low angle of a dusty path, footprints half covered by wind-blown sand. Each step tells a story, a path forged by ambition, greed, and survival. No one walks this land without leaving a mark, and no mark goes unnoticed. From above, the horizon seems endless. Yet every corner hides risk, every turn offers danger. The land is patient, watching, waiting. It does not forgive, and it does not forget. Somewhere, far beyond sight, a figure pauses, hand on the fence, staring at the horizon. They know the storm is coming, and they know that when it hits, nothing will ever be the same. The warning is clear, though unspoken. The land always collects its due. The tension had been building for months, but nobody could have predicted just how fragile everything had become. Deals that once seemed ironclad were now cracking under the weight of betrayal and greed. Every handshake carried suspicion. Every conversation held the shadow of a hidden agenda. The land, once a symbol of opportunity, now felt like a trap, a silent witness to the endless cycle of lies and broken promises. Men who once appeared untouchable now moved with careful steps, glancing over shoulders as if expecting the ground to open beneath them. Power had a smell, and it was getting harder to breathe in its thick, suffocating presence. No one could tell who would betray whom next, and that uncertainty hung in the air like smoke from a fire that refused to die. It was in these moments the cracks in trust showed the clearest. Friends turned into rivals, and allies were often the ones who carried knives in their pockets. The office walls, the boardroom tables, even the land itself seemed to watch silently as tension crept into every interaction. Emails went unanswered, meetings were delayed, and every word spoken had the weight of consequence. People were no longer negotiating, they were surviving. Every decision, no matter how small, could tip the scales toward disaster. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about staying ahead, keeping secrets buried, and making sure that the right enemies were silenced before they struck. The past seemed to have a way of clawing back at those who thought they were untouchable. Mistakes from months ago resurfaced. Alliances that had once seemed loyal now fractured under pressure, and the consequences of ignored warnings became impossible to avoid. The land itself, vast and unyielding, became a symbol of the battles fought in shadow, the invisible wars of influence and control that could crush a man before he even realized he was in danger. Those who thought they could play the game with ease were finding themselves outmaneuvered at every turn, caught in the web of their own ambition and the unpredictability of others. And yet, even as the tension grew, life on the surface appeared calm. The sun rose and set over the hills and fields that hid these conflicts beneath their quiet beauty. Meetings were scheduled, deals were discussed, and laughter echoed in the wrong places, giving a false sense of security. But behind closed doors, the real game was happening. Words were weapons, trust was currency, and patience had become more valuable than gold. Every look, every gesture, and every silence carried meaning, shaping the path of what was to come. The pressure wasn't just external, it had seeped into the minds of those involved, gnawing at their focus, clouding their judgment, and forcing them into corners where only the bold or reckless could survive. And as the episode drew closer, the inevitability of confrontation loomed. The choices made in the shadows were starting to collide with the daylight, and the calm before the storm was thin and fleeting. What had once been a world of opportunity had transformed into a battlefield of conscience, greed, and survival. Men and women who thought they were in control were realizing that control was an illusion, and the land, in all its silent witness, had a way of demanding its due. Nothing would remain the same after this. Every deal, every betrayal, every unspoken threat was building toward a moment that could shatter everything. The pressure wasn't just a feeling, it was a force, one that would not relent, and those who thought they could withstand it were about to discover just how high the stakes truly were. Power had always been an abstract idea for many, something admired from a distance, something envied but never fully understood until it landed squarely on one's shoulders. In episode 7, it wasn't just about who owned the land or who signed the contracts, it was about who could bear the weight of consequence. Every decision, every choice made in quiet rooms and whispered conversations carried a cost that wasn't always visible until it was too late. The balance of influence had shifted, and those who had once felt untouchable now found themselves negotiating not with rivals, but with the invisible forces of fate, circumstance, and their own conscience. Each move on this chessboard demanded more than cleverness, it demanded sacrifice. And sometimes, the price was measured in pieces of one's soul rather than numbers on a sheet of paper. It was strange how easily people forgot that power was never free. The larger the ambition, the heavier the burden. Those who chased authority for the thrill of dominance often discovered, too late, that the very tools they used to build their empires could become the chains that bound them. Friendships that had seemed steadfast began to crumble under scrutiny. Promises that had once felt binding turned into nothing more than empty echoes, and the very people one trusted the most could become the instruments of one's downfall. Every glance in a boardroom, every delayed response to a message, every hesitation in signing a contract became a reminder that power demanded vigilance, patience, and a willingness to pay a toll that was invisible yet unavoidable. The land itself, sprawling and silent, seemed to absorb the tension, reflecting the hidden cost of ambition. Fields that once promised opportunity now carried the weight of expectation. The people involved, moving carefully through deals and negotiations, were acutely aware that every misstep could trigger a domino effect, toppling relationships, fortunes, and reputations alike. It was not just the outsiders who were affected. Those within the inner circle, whose decisions had seemed minor at the moment, were discovering that even the smallest compromise could become a critical turning point. The quiet whispers in the corridors were not just rumors, they were warnings, subtle indicators that the cost of power was rarely predictable and often paid in full by the unsuspecting. And yet, amidst the pressure and uncertainty, there was a strange allure to it all. Power seduced with promises of control, recognition, and influence. It made the impossible seem achievable and the unthinkable seem reasonable. But with that seduction came the inevitable reckoning. Those who had managed to navigate the maze of alliances and deceit were beginning to realize that control was always temporary, and every action had a shadow trailing behind it, waiting to strike. In Episode 7, the true theme emerged not through dialogue or overt conflict, but through the subtle erosion of certainty, the moments when hesitation and doubt collided with ambition and greed. It was the quiet, relentless reminder that every empire has cracks, and every person holding the reins must be prepared to face what comes when the foundation shifts beneath them. The cost of power became tangible in ways both visible and unseen. Deals that seemed profitable brought hidden obligations, secrets held for leverage became burdens, and the attempt to control others often meant losing control of oneself. Characters who had once felt invincible were now forced to confront the reality that influence came at a price far higher than they had imagined. Every glance at the horizon, every step across the boardroom floor, every signature on a contract was a calculated gamble. There were no guarantees, only consequences that would unfold in time, silently and inevitably, changing the landscape of both the land and the people who sought to claim it. By the time Episode 7 reached its climax, the audience understood that the true power in this world was not in ownership, wealth, or status. It was in enduring the price it demanded, and surviving when everything else threatened to collapse. He walked through the quiet halls as if every step echoed louder than it should, carrying with him the weight of decisions that could no longer be undone. The world around him moved fast. Emails pinged, phones rang, deals shifted, but he felt trapped in a slow-motion bubble, every choice magnified, every misstep permanent. There was a strange solitude in the center of power, a silence that was never truly silent, filled with the unspoken fears of both enemies and allies alike. People smiled, nodded, and pretended trust, yet he could see the sharp edges beneath the surface, the intentions hidden in polite conversation. It was a game he had been trained to play, yet this time, the stakes were different. This time, the game was no longer about strategy or cunning, it was about endurance, about facing the truth of who he had become and who he might lose in the process. He remembered the early days when ambition had seemed simple and the path forward clear. Every deal had a number, every choice a metric, and every victory a tangible reward. But as the layers of negotiation and deception accumulated, the clarity had dissolved into a murky fog of doubt and anticipation. He could no longer tell who he could trust, and that uncertainty gnawed at him relentlessly. Allies who had once stood unwavering at his side now paused, measured, and reconsidered, as if the world had shifted under their feet without warning. In this episode, he was not merely a man in a story, he was a storm center, the point where tension converged, the axis upon which the fate of many revolved. Every decision he made rippled outward, touching lives he might never see, consequences he might never control. The nights were the hardest, in the darkness, away from the flickering lights of office towers and the hum of distant machines. He faced himself more honestly than anyone else could. Every mistake, every compromise, every moral corner cut to maintain influence pressed down with a weight that could not be lifted. The world expected strength, demanded resilience, and rewarded results. Yet in the quiet, he grappled with the cost of survival. He asked himself whether the victories were worth the price, whether the power he held so tightly would ultimately define him or destroy him. These were not rhetorical questions. Each decision carried a visible and invisible toll, a reminder that leadership in this environment was a test not of skill alone, but of character under relentless pressure. And yet, even as the pressure mounted, there was an undeniable presence in him of focus, a sharpness that others failed to see until it was too late. He observed the smallest movements, caught the briefest glances, and read intentions hidden behind polite words, the land, the deals. The shifting loyalties, they were all pieces of a puzzle he could manipulate, but never fully control. This made him both dangerous and vulnerable, a man simultaneously at the top and at the mercy of forces beyond comprehension. His isolation was not simply physical, it was the solitude of responsibility. The quiet knowledge that the outcome of this episode would hinge on choices only he could make. Friends might falter, enemies might strike, and yet the weight remained on his shoulders. By the time episode 7 reached its climax, the man at the center was no longer merely a participant, he was the embodiment of the tension itself. His every glance, every pause, every decision reflected the high cost of ambition and the fragile balance between survival and collapse. Viewers would feel his anxiety, his calculation, his moral wrestling, even without seeing his face or hearing his words directly. The camera might linger on the land, on documents, on fleeting interactions, but the pulse of the story, the emotional core, was him. He represented the human cost of power, the quiet struggle behind every deal, and the relentless pressure of being the one everyone depended on while knowing that one wrong move could end it all. In this episode, it wasn't just about what he achieved, but what he was willing to sacrifice, what he was forced to confront, and what he might lose in the relentless pursuit of control.